We cover a lot of different areas, and we convene sort of research groups, discussions, meetings, conferences, talks, and try to engage with issues of concern to the community as a whole. So I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
So we've got a great panel lined up tonight. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Laura. Oh, Laura, you're on mute. Oh, sorry. Can you mute now?
Thank you. Yes, I
Sorry.
can. So I'm Laura Ilupeju, and I'm studying biomedical science in NYG, and I'm the auditor of the African Caribbean Society.
And Tobi, if you want to unmute as well and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Tobi Lawal. I'm a law grad from UL, and I'm currently working part-time for UL, and I'm a legal researcher for the Office of Senator Lynn Ruane, and I'm also an activist.
And Matthew?
Hello, I'm Matthew. I'm from Northern Ireland. I'm a student at Belfast Met, and I do film and TV, and I make funny videos on the internet.
And finally, Leon.
Hi everyone, absolute pleasure to be here speaking to you tonight. So I am a psychology graduate from a university. I was student union president there for 2 years. I'm the founder of Black and Irish, which is a platform that's trying to, I suppose, highlight and celebrate the struggles of, not celebrate the struggles of, but you know what I mean. It's trying to highlight the struggles of Black and mixed race people in Ireland and challenge those issues. So absolutely thrilled to be talking to you here today.
Sadly, we had another speaker, Pork, but he can't make it tonight as he is stuck in a train station and it's very loud. So I think we'll get started now, Daniel. If you guys have any questions throughout the night that you would like to ask the panelists, feel free to send them to me in direct chat. So Daniel, if you want to get started.
Cheyanne, yeah, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to have been working with you on this event, which we've been talking about for a while. Obviously, I suppose particularly, since the events of May last year with the death of George Floyd, there's been a great deal of wider attention, clearly not just in the US, but in Europe and even worldwide, to issues of institutional racism, particularly focusing in that case, obviously, on the police. And now the trial clearly taking place at the moment in Minneapolis with Derek Chauvin. So I thought maybe we might discuss that issue in the first instance, and partly to think a little bit about your reaction to it and how that reaction maybe has evolved over time. So I don't, Leon, if you might sort of kick things off and talk to us a little bit just about, again, how you responded maybe in the moment and how your thoughts developed. Yeah.
Sure. So I remember initially seeing the video of the murder of George Floyd and being really upset, really angry, really frustrated, feeling a little bit kind of helpless because I was in Ireland. There wasn't a whole lot that we could do here. But what ultimately transpired from that was a feeling of wanting to do something in Ireland and I suppose show solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement that was re-emerging in the States, and bring authentic discussion back to Ireland about race and racism and how we can challenge the issues that we have here. So ultimately it was the murder of George Floyd that led to Black and Irish being created and wanting to do something and challenge what was going on here. My reaction has changed over time. Initially it was upset and anger. I think it's changed more so to not being surprised that this has happened. It's happened many times before. Unfortunately, we've seen it happen again recently. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear my housemates are here as well, but it's important that we try and learn from what's happened and try and work going forward on the issues that we have here in Ireland and focus on the issues here and try and resolve them as best as we can.
Thanks. Yeah, well, maybe we'll come back to that question of issues that are being faced in Ireland. I think actually I might ask you, Tobi, partly because of your background in law. I think it would be interesting just to get your response to it. Was your response, how would you characterize your response? Was it partly geared around the fact that you had, almost like a relationship to the domain of the law in which this incident was taking place, or could you say something more about that?
To be quite honest, I didn't really think of the legal aspect of it when it first happened. I suppose at the end of the day, I am a young Black woman, and seeing a video of a young Black man being murdered by police in America is not something that anyone should have to see. I don't know. I guess at the beginning, I felt a lot of frustration and anger. There was a lot of anger there. And I guess that incident was what spurred me to, how would I say, jump into the world of activism and speak out about, racism in Ireland. And when I say racism in Ireland, I mean that at every level. We can look at racism in schools, in the medical system in Ireland, like within the legal system. That will bring me to that as well. I've realized so much in the past year, especially working on research projects, just how discriminatory the Irish legal system is. And I definitely think that is an aspect that a lot of people in Ireland aren't really aware of as they should be. And now when I say that, we can look at asylum seekers in this example, things like getting their cases to court, being able to access like free legal aid. It's not there for a lot of them. A lot of people don't know this, and that is a form of racism. And I definitely think that that's an aspect that we do need to deal with in Ireland. But from George Floyd's murder, I definitely think that if anything, it's awakened the fact that there is an issue of racism in Ireland. Like, we all know that, every Black person knows that, but I definitely think for the white Irish community, it was a big slap in the face, because at the end of the day, you like to think that the place you call home is welcoming, and it's a very, how would I say, diverse environment for all that are in it. But at the end of the day, we did realize that we have a huge, massive problem in this country. And I guess, if anything, it's almost helped to address the good, the bad, and the ugly, in the sense that now it's not just a question of does racism exist, it's a question of how do we tackle it. How do we speak up and say, this is wrong, and not just on a interpersonal level, but also at an institutional level too.
So do you think that, the killing of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd was a galvanizing event in that sense? That it
100%. Yeah. I definitely think in Ireland anyways it was.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's been true in the United States. Like, it's provoked, I'm from the US myself. It's provoked, it's very difficult to deny the problem when it's so graphically in front of you. Not that the whole point being that it isn't rare, it isn't unusual. There are many other cases, even if people have had knees on their necks and so on. So I think that's also disturbing, that it takes one incredibly graphic moment caught on iPhones to a certain extent as to say, no, this cannot continue. Yeah. And I think we'll come back in a moment to aspects that are specific to Ireland. But I did maybe want to ask Laura as well, just again to get your reaction to that moment. Was it very significant for you too personally?
Yeah, it was. So whenever I watched that video, I just remember being very disturbed and upsetted by just what was happened, and even looking through replies on Instagram and Twitter and people supporting the police that done it and stuff. It really just highlighted how normalized racism is in our society and how much needs to be done to tackle this. And then the Black Lives Matter movement was reestablished after that, just to really show that we matter just as much as everyone else does. And so it just really highlighted the daily violence, that is against Black people.
A number of you have commented on how that moment sort of, in a sense, refueled the Black Lives Matter. What is your sense about maybe why Black Lives Matter had stalled as a movement? Did you have a sense of that, or is that just maybe too hard to construct at this stage?
Yeah, so I think because racism was normalized so much, it was kind of just disregarded and no one really paid attention. And that event really just showed how far we have come in the world and how much we need to do to tackle it.
Yeah. Matthew, maybe I could come to you and get your reaction. So you're based in Northern Ireland, is that right?
Yeah, I'm from Northern Ireland, and whenever I initially saw the whole George Floyd situation unfold, at first I was completely desensitized to that stuff. I mean, majority of my life I've been sort of taught, sort of drilled in from a young age that it's sort of that happens, but it could be worse, it could be worse. Whenever I saw that, my eyes were open to the fact that stuff actually happens to people because of the color of skin. I mean, I've heard about it happening in Northern Ireland. It's quite a common thing. Xenophobia is more xenophobia than it would be racism, but it's people discriminating against you for where you're from. And, they put people out because of their certain nationality. They put people out because they're a certain color of skin. And it's just normalized here. I mean, people get their houses paint bombed. People writing, go back to your own country. They don't like foreigners. They don't like people. It was instilled from a very young age. So seeing like collectively, I mean, especially in Northern Ireland, there was an uproar about it. I mean, it was the first time I've ever seen like a culmination of over like 200, 300 people come together and say that they support me and my community because of the fact that that happened, and it opened my eyes to a completely new like way of seeing things.
And how do people communicate that as a matter of interest? Is it kind of through social media, through direct contact, or?
Well, I was at both of the Black Lives Matter protests in Belfast, and it was everybody took to social media, which was the first aspect of obviously everybody Blackout Tuesday, where they just blacked out their screen on Instagram, and everybody sort of came together in that sense. I got a lot of people messaging me because I speak quite heavily about a lot of issues. I try to keep myself well versed when it comes to politics, especially in countries like Northern Ireland and Ireland, and a lot of people came to me and they gave me lots of support. But obviously, there's always going to be those certain individuals who are out there who are a little bit based in there, just sort of like it doesn't have anything to do with race. And that's just normalized here in Northern Ireland. I mean, it's a very conservative country when it comes to stuff like this here. So whenever they saw the Black Lives Matter organization and they see people coming together, during the middle of like a pandemic, which is understandable, but they were blaming it on us for being the second wave. So there's a lot of criticism for it whenever there was statistics to back up the fact that Black Lives Matter protests in Northern Ireland had no correlation to increase in COVID cases. So it's just people trying to find a way to take a dig at a situation like that.
Yeah. This is really your take on it. It's a very interesting question about differences between Northern Ireland and the Republic, which we might try to think about as well. Actually, quite intriguing. Obviously, being part of the UK, which has much, in one sense, much greater awareness of these issues and greater ethnic diversity. On the other hand, it's a province within our country within this larger collective. That raises some interesting questions. Yeah, maybe Leon, I might come back to you and just talk about some of the things that you've been doing with Black and Irish, and again, taking your lead from this moment. Like, it's okay, suddenly there's some things we have to get on the agenda and establish, conversations about activism and contributions on. So how did you, actually it'd be interesting to just get into how did you do it? What were the steps that you took at that point in time to set up an organization and to make it happen?
Sure. So we initially started with sharing people's experiences and stories, what it was like for them growing up in Ireland as a Black or mixed race person. And from that, we were able to identify a number of different themes that were, emerging, experiencing a lot of overt racism from a very young age. Then when they're moving into college, trying to access housing and, being treated differently by teachers and stuff like that. So we identified a number of different areas that we wanted to work in, and ultimately we've structured ourselves around that now. So we identify education as a very key thing, and not just education in terms of educating people around race and racism, but also our education system itself, and saying to ourselves our education system is not robust enough for people to be, I suppose, educated in race and racism, and kids understanding race and racism from a very young age and understanding diversity and inclusion from that young age. And I don't think our teachers are prepared enough, and this is stemming from conversations that we're having with teachers. Our teachers are not given the training in order to deal with these racist incidents when they're happening in schools. We did a podcast recently with RTE, um, where we had a couple of teachers on it, a couple of Black and mixed race teachers who are working in Ireland, and they're saying the training is not there. We don't know what to do whenever these events are happening. We know from our personal experiences what should be done, and how to talk to the class about race and racism. But ultimately, you know, we know that our colleagues are not prepared for it, and that's what their colleagues are saying as well. So we're working on a project at the moment called the Black Inclusive Curriculum, which is about making our curriculum more inclusive to Black history, Black experiences, and to Black people as a whole. Because at the minute it's very Black exclusive. The most that you're doing in terms of learning about Black people is reading To Kill a Mockingbird, which is terrible. So um, the Black Inclusive Curriculum is writing to the NCAA, which is the national curriculum body, and trying to make it more inclusive. We're running a number of workshops, and where we're speaking to Black and white people about their experiences coming through the education system in Ireland, and how they found it. And what we're seeing from the white teachers is that you know, they're coming on, they're like, we really just want to learn because we don't know what is going on. We're really, really struggling in terms of talking to our class about diversity and inclusion and dealing with incidents when they arise. So I think we need to be speaking to the children in classes about what diversity and inclusion is, why it's so important to having a well-rounded society, and training our teachers so that when they encounter these problems or want to talk about it, that they're well prepped to do so. So that's just one project that we're doing with Black and Irish at the moment.
Wow, sounds brilliant. And have you found people to be generally receptive, teachers, for example? It sounds like they're kind of looking for the input that you're providing, or have you met with resistance?
Yeah, we haven't met with any resistance so far. You know, we've been quite. I think we've been quite good in that respect. In the focus groups, we've seen a lot of input. We've got teachers joining Black and White. We've got students joining who are Black and White and being like, yeah, I don't know anything about Black history. You know, I've learned loads about my own history. I know everything about, you know, where I'm coming from, what's going on with me. But you know, there's Black students who are like, I read Of Mice and Men, and that was pretty much all we did. We didn't have any initiatives in school and stuff like that. We're also seeing a lot of parents joining, parents of you know, Black students who will be going into the education system, and also white parents of mixed race children who are very worried, you know, about the state of the curriculum at the moment. You know that it's very outdated, that their kids will be going through it, not getting a full understanding of the picture. I mean, one example that came up was, you know, poverty is talked a lot about in Africa, and you know how, you know, the choker boxes are brought into the class, and everyone was talked about like, oh yeah, we're going to raise money for choker and stuff like that. And you know, there's this image that's portrayed of Africa being poor stricken and, you know, full of poverty and full of disease and stuff like that. But no one talks about the reason why all of the resources in Africa have been stripped away, you know, or different issues like that. So I think that's a massive piece that needs to be done in our schools, is full context, full understanding, and full diversity and inclusion, you know, learning happening in our schools.
Thanks. Tobi, I wonder if I could ask you about the kinds of things that you've been doing and that you've been particularly involved in and advocating for in Ireland.
I've kind of done everything really. I think the first major thing that I did as an activist, I like to put that in quotation marks because I just think that that's just, it's not an individual thing, it should be a community-wide thing. But I think for me, the issue was the asylum seeker system in Ireland. I definitely think that when everyone decided that they were going to acknowledge that race was a problem, I think everyone conveniently decided to leave out the fact that there are over 7,000 people in a system in this country that are continuously discriminated on every single day, through accessing the workforce, how they live, their accommodation. And I noted, just from my own following, because I had a predominantly white following at the time, that people didn't really know what direct provision was. They didn't understand why people were coming into the country seeking asylum. They didn't even know what an asylum seeker was. So I basically made a short video just outlining the pretty much basics about the direct provision system online. And it went semi-viral, and a lot of people donated money towards MASI, their Movement for Asylum Seekers Ireland. So they're basically the main organisation in the country that, you know, support asylum seekers. And I guess from that, I kind of realized that there was a fear amongst the white population in Ireland about asking questions about race and having those difficult conversations and being able to, you know, educate themselves without seeming ignorant or, you know, careless or callous even. And from there, I decided to start up this segment that I called Wise Up Wednesdays, which was kind of, how would I say, every week I'd bring up a topic. So for example, interracial relationships, you know, just any kind of subjects around race. And I would open the floor to my followers and we would discuss it. And it was so interesting because there was a lot of young Black women and men that had a lot of issues around race growing up, but never could put a name to it. They didn't understand what the term was. And for me, it was such a great opportunity to connect, to sympathize, to understand. And likewise, for my white followers, it was a great time for them to learn and to put their egos aside, because that was a challenge. You know, when you hear something that you're doing is wrong and you're challenged on it, it takes a while to adjust. But I definitely think that it was a really good learning point. But that came to an end then with the murder of George and Kencho, because I used my platform to speak out about that. And my post on that went semi-viral, and the hate was just like, it was absolutely out of this world. I've got pretty thick skin, and I've seen a lot, I've read a lot, I've been sent a lot, but that was what kind of made me take a step back from activism per se. So now I'm kind of like, I'm writing articles from time to time. Like I wrote an article for Image magazine back in January on the murder of Jordan Kensho and how I felt about it and the aftermath. But yeah, that's pretty much it, really.
Okay. And what, as a matter of interest, what platform did you use for the sessions that you organized, that you were talking about?
Instagram.
Okay. And so you would have these as kind of live events then, and yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Well, actually, maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about that incident with Jordan Kensho, his killing by in a Gardaí operation, in effect, in Dublin at the end of December, and there has been not a formal inquiry. The family has obviously called for an inquiry. Maybe that's perhaps the first question I could ask you. There's obviously an investigation going on, a Garda Commission investigating going on. There's been a request from the family for a public inquiry. Have you taken a position yourself on that? What you think would be best?
Is that for me?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
To be quite honest, be very honest, I'm not really sure, because personally, I am 100% on the fact that it was 100% a race issue. I just will not debate that with anyone. But I definitely think that there is no hate crime legislation in Ireland. So even if the family were to say that, look, this was, race had a factor to play in our son's murder, I don't really know what grounds they would have to stand on that. And I know I think there was an article or a news bite where the family was saying that they were going to maybe look at it from a class aspect, which for me was a bit mind-boggling. But obviously that's a family decision and everybody has to respect that, because at the end of the day, I feel like race and class can be at play at once. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But in saying that, I do think that at this point in time, there's a lot of, a lot of focus on why it wasn't, to do with race, as opposed to the fact that a young mentally ill Black man was shot several times. And the state pathologist examination, I read that, I can't remember where I read it, but it said that he was actually shot was also with his back turned. So for me, there's just a lot of technicalities that I feel like people tend to skip when they're discussing his murder, which for me is infuriating, because once again, we're denying that race was an issue, because at the end of the day, he was a young Black man like other young Black men in the States. And I know people will stop me there and say, you can't compare, but you can, because at the end of the day, it is institutionalized racism. It is known fact that the Gardaí are racist, and I can hands on my heart say that, because I've also had experience with the Gardaí being racist, and I definitely think that that's an issue where it's not just one bad egg or two bad eggs or a wrong mistake. Like, it is an institutional problem. And I think that in Ireland, that is something that we honestly need to start looking at, because I just think as of now, it's kind of a case of, oh, tell us your experiences of racism. Gosh, isn't that awful? And then it's kind of a point of, okay, where do we go from here? What happens next? And I definitely think that a lot of white Irish people are in that position.
Yeah, that is a major question. And obviously the whole issue of institutional racism as opposed to incidental racism, I'm not quite sure what distinction is being made, but there's a huge resistance to it in the United States, where the problem is so graphic. You think, well, all right, if the United States cannot acknowledge that it has a problem, other societies which are, have had less of a confrontation with it are probably going to struggle in their sense that this can be incredibly insidious and well embedded within institutions. So that's maybe a question we could come back to. Actually, I'm curious to ask you whether have you been following the story of Jordan Kensho? Has that had much attention in Northern Ireland? Would you say are there some issues that get awareness south of the border that maybe or not?
Well, obviously, I tried to keep myself up to date about it because it's something to do with Ireland and Northern Ireland. But not many people spoke about it. I mean, I noticed a few of my Black friends talk about it, but there was very little coverage because of the fact of how controversial it was. I mean, I think it was something to do with race. I personally believe that. But the backlash, as Toby was saying there was a heavy backlash for anyone who talked about it and gave an opinion, which was to say that it was racist, because there was multiple factors which were included inside that there, which people could dismiss the fact that it could have been racist, which is fair enough. I can understand their perspective, but also is like, from a black person's perspective, I can see where they're coming from. It's trying to keep the balance between both of those there, because I mean, Northern Ireland, no one talked about it, but I saw a lot of black creators talk about it on their social media platforms, and if they were black, they gave an opinion which was going against it, there were hundreds, if not thousands. Toby, I'd like to hear your opinion on it, but there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people who would come and constantly criticize you. I mean, I got criticized about it because I misinterpreted one of the facts about it, and you know, they bite on to anything that would be said there that can be used as a way to weaponize your statements. So
yeah, Toby, you were saying you had
Dan, your microphone.
Sorry, Dan. Yeah, your mic's muted now.
unmuted myself. I was just to say a little bit more about the
Oh,
background.
I think it's a bit muffled or something. Something's covering it, maybe.
Is that okay? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Probably, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, the question that I had for Toby was really about your own decision to kind of move in another direction in terms of the work that you were doing as a result of what you'd experienced. Maybe say a little bit more about that.
I wouldn't say it's moved me to another direction. I definitely think that it's prevented me from using my platform to the extent that I did before, and that's 100% a personal decision. But I definitely felt that a lot of people are trying to convince me of what I knew, and and tell me that no, it's not about race, and argue with me. I actually had one of the men, because I decided to put up comparisons of previous scenarios that had happened involving white men and the outcome of that. And one of the criminals actually messaged me and said, hey, my situation was different because so and so and so. And for me, it was just so baffling to the point that even a criminal is telling me that, what the facts that you have is wrong, your mindset on this is wrong. And so many people, to the point making personal digs about my my career, saying that they were going to find me. It was insane. I've never ever experienced something to that degree where white Irish people, and it wasn't, people like to message people from fake accounts. It wasn't fake accounts. It was people with their public profiles contacting, threatening people. I even had friends who spoke out about it that were also threatened. It was just, for me, it just revealed something so ugly in the country that I thought, maybe it was very naive of me, I thought that we're making progress, in the sense that for once I could come out and say that, what, something that happened to me is racist, and not be met with looks of shock and disbelief that it was a case of people. I shouldn't have taken a murder of a black man for people to recognize that, but it did happen. So I kind of felt like we took 20 steps back when George Inkencha was murdered, because it almost felt like I think people were scared because they didn't want to admit that, how would I say, the protector of peace, the guard on Garda Síochána, would murder somebody like that outside his family home with his family watching inside. To me, it's barbaric, and the response to it it honestly blew my mind. I've not been as shocked about something in life as I was shocked about that.
That's extremely eye-opening. I mean, I wasn't certainly not aware of that kind of backlash dimension of what was going on. I have been wondering about how much awareness there is in Ireland of the story. There have been occasional reports in the Irish Times and other things, but I have a feeling that there's maybe not that much awareness in the country actually of the issue. But I think what you're saying is also significant, because again, it suggests that no, there's a, I'm not even sure it should be called an undercurrent, but for lack of a better word, undercurrent of moving against this and trying to shut down speech, where people don't want to acknowledge problems. That's very serious and significant. Laura, I wanted to come back to you actually, and maybe to see if you could talk a little bit about the African Caribbean Society and the work that you're doing at NUI Galway and the group that you have going.
Okay, so the African Caribbean Society, so that was set up simply just to spread our culture and our music, food, all that, to just, form a community of Black people on campus, because we are a minority group in campus. And right now we're currently trying to collect books actually to send to a school in Nigeria that was flooded. And we also did have a event for Diversity Week, I think back on Monday, where we cooked jollof rice and like taught other students in NUIG how to cook it. And yeah, we host events, try to collab with other societies just to spread awareness of like our presence on campus.
Presumably there have been challenges in COVID of, getting everybody organized and together. So how do you host your meetings then? Do you do things online, or are there other ways of getting together?
Yeah, so we have like weekly committee meetings on Zoom, and then we plan stuff to do like with students from NUIG, but it's all on Zoom. We also had like a Ghana Independence Day event just to, like still recognize that day. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
How many folks do you have in the group at the moment?
So like in the committee, there's 9 of us, I believe, and then in the society, there's loads more, but people just join and leave whenever they feel like it.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, and there was the society had existed before, but I think it naturally, it depends on the levels of interest, and organizers and people like you kind of take the lead. So I'm glad to see that it's back up and running. And are there plans for next academic year as well going forward?
Yeah, so we're hoping to keep it running because most of us are in first and second year. So like we will have a few more years left in NUIG, and hopefully you can like pass it on to the next people that are coming in and stuff. So
yeah, that's a key thing. And obviously, I suppose, Cheyanne, in your role as well as your SU minorities officer, that you also want to create that continuity at the same time as well. Do you have responsibility for societies as well, or how maybe you might say a little bit about your role actually within the university?
Yeah, I actually don't have any links with the societies directly, but I did contact the African and Caribbean Society just for some ideas a while ago. And they had some great ideas. So I would definitely say stay tuned for anything that they have planned coming up. But yeah, my role is really important. I definitely think, a role only recently introduced in the last few years to NUIG, but I definitely think one that was well needed. Galway is such a diverse county, so I definitely think, with the majority of students, like a massive 20,000 students going to NUIG, I definitely think it's important that, the ethnic minority students have someone that they can, go to if they need anything or need any help or anything.
Yeah, actually, I hope you don't mind if I ask a little more about that and about the work that you're doing. So when did you start that office then? That was last semester, yeah?
Yeah, I ran in the by-elections just in December, so just a few months, to be honest.
And have you been finding it a challenge to balance that, I imagine, with your other?
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one because I'm only in first year as well. So it was definitely a tough one, but I've loved it so much, and I've definitely learned so much about anyone that I've helped, or I've learned so much as well about things going on in the world that people would contact me about that I wouldn't know about. As one student contacted me about farmer protests in India, and I had no clue about that. And I do try and stay on top of my news, but that wasn't anything I knew about, and it was just like really interesting. So yeah.
And so are there also events that you organize in the context of your role, or is it more you're there to liaise with students as they might raise particular issues and things that have come up?
It's kind of 50-50, I would say. I definitely think this year it's hard to organize events as, being online and everything. But I think definitely my role this year has to liaise with students and everything. And maybe as well, if I had, if I'd been in the role since September, I definitely think there would have been more time to organize events and such.
Yeah, I think this might be a question for you and for Laura, actually. It's just things that you think the university can and should be doing. Do you think there's more that they should do? Are you satisfied with the university's, commitment in general to questions of diversity? This is Diversity Week, in which our event is taking place, so it's a good opportunity to think more generally about that. I don't know, Cheyanne, if you have a thought on that about, at this stage, about the university's commitment to questions of diversity, and maybe in particular to the Black Lives questions.
It's a tough one because only being a first year student and never being on campus, it's kind of hard to know, NUIG's motive and their, I suppose, their backing behind all the ethnic minority students. But I definitely think there is more that we can do. you know, there was a week for recognition of travelers in higher education just a few weeks ago, just for like their diversity. But I was quite disappointed when there wasn't a Black Lives Matter month, or, you know, Black History Month back in November. I know it was only, I suppose, the start of the semester and start of the term for everyone, but I suppose it was quite disappointing, seeing as, you know, there is an amazing amount of like Black students going to NUIG, and just, I suppose, just not get them recognized as like people and their history. And I think it's such an important month, and it was just nothing. I heard of it anyways. I don't know if Laura heard anything about it, but I definitely didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, Laura, whether you wanted to come in there about your take on, you know, the university and its you know, potential contribution, and whether you think there's more it could be doing.
Yeah, like Cheyanne said, like Black History Month, it would have been nice to, you know, have stuff organized for that. And I think the university can do more for minorities in general, such like if there are groups on campus spreading hateful messages, you know, like deplatform them and stuff like that. And yeah, even more like workshops to, you know, raise awareness on these issues. Like there already are anti-racism workshops, but I'd like to see it like happen more often, orientation weeks, stuff like that.
And what do you think particularly about, say for directed towards undergraduates, for example? Was that what you were thinking, or more widely?
Well, more widely would be nice, but you know, from the first day orientation, like there should be a bit of talk and like inclusivity and like diversity and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think that's a very important suggestion, actually. In relation to Black History Month, actually, Leon, I was wondering, is that something that you engage with some of the you were talking about the education dimension?
Yeah.
You focus on that particularly, or?
Yeah. So in terms of education, Black History Month is a huge month. It's generally around in October in the UK and Ireland, and in February in the US. So that's why you may have seen some posts of Black History Month recently as well. But yeah, in terms of Black History, so we ran a Black History Week a few months prior to Black History Month, and in the Black History Week we focused on Black Irish history, because not a whole lot is known about that, and yet Black people have been in Ireland for hundreds of years. But then bringing it up to October, then we focus on you know, Black history from around the world. And a lot of the times when people are talking about Black history, they speak about the likes of Martin Luther King, slavery, Jim Crow, civil rights movements in the 50s and 60s. But there's a whole lot more to Black history than just that. You know, you've got Brazilian Black history, you've got you know, Black history from Africa, the continent of Africa itself. You know, talking about different kingdoms and stuff like that that were, you know, that rose and fell in Africa, and that history is so rich and is so powerful, and that's, you know, it's so important that people understand that as well, because a lot of the time, Black and mixed people in Ireland are taught we come from a continent that is poverty stricken and stuff like that, whereas our histories are so rich and so colorful and stuff like that, and it's important that we embrace that, because it can give us that sense of pride in ourselves. But yeah, so that's what we would have focused on for Black History Month back in October.
I think I think that might be something where we can get back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to help.
Pretty obvious that, you know, the university, I mean, it's great that you're directing things to schools, which is particularly valuable, but I think maybe at, you know, third level, we could also do with an injection of ideas and, you know, interesting possibilities. So, Matthew, I wanted to ask you about something, which is this report that came out in the UK. I don't know whether you were looking at the Sewell, it's variously called the Sewell Report or the UK CRED, you know, the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities. They came out with their report at the end of March. Is that something you were looking at? I mean, it's been interesting, the controversy about it, because it seemed to be more or less saying, this is brilliant. We're, you know, there's essentially no problem in the UK. It's, you know, all good. You know, things are looking up. Had you engaged with that or reacted?
I've heard about that situation there. I think, don't quote me on it, but it was something to do with, it was Boris Johnson, I'm fairly certain, or something like that there. It was to say that there's no race problem here.
Yeah.
And
nothing to see approach of, you know,
see no evil here, no evil. That's such a, it blows my, it's preposterous. Is it preposterous, honestly, to believe that there's no race issue in the UK? Like, I mean, to look at Grenfell, right? Grenfell, it's one of the most, it was like the biggest race issue, and when it came to like actual money, like they literally didn't pay for things that got upgraded in a building, and it led to burning down of a building. What else can you say about, like, it's more class than anything. But why are the black people in the UK seemingly being they're lower caste? It's just what it is. Like, I mean, race is tied to being lower caste, and I believe the black people have felt the blunt of it because of diaspora. It's people think that there's no race issue, but you've literally allowed organizations like Britain First, you've got organizations like the EDL, and they say there's no race issue, and it's normalized to be like, oh, foreigners are coming here taking our job. That's a form of racism, and it might not just be the black people. It's a race issue to people who come from Europe, like Eastern Europe. People like I've know many of my friends, especially in Northern Ireland at least, there's a way more is more down to where you're from than race. Sadly, I mean, only making up 0.2% of the population here in Northern Ireland are black people. You know, I've experienced racism. I've experienced people being like, go back to your own country, this, that, and the other. But I've also met people who are from Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, Romania, who've all experienced the same thing as me. And it's just an issue which is all around, something that's here, and it's not going to leave. Like, it's sadly to say, I mean, educating people about it, and the government being like, oh, no race issue. There's no race issue here. It's something that's tied, especially where I'm from, it's tied into who you are. Like, you get so desensitized to everything about that. Oh, Leon's because I don't want to hear him speak.
I think, Leon, you wanted to come in there, yeah.
No, just Matthew, I think that those points are actually fantastic. I didn't want to interject. I just wanted to come in after you because, you know, I fully agree with what you were saying on that. One thing that I note from the Sewell report is that, and we see it quite often, you know, denial of racism is really, really prevalent across the UK and Ireland. You know, no one is going to put their hands up and go, I was at fault. Do you know what I mean? Everyone is like, everyone is perfect. Do you know what I mean? Everyone is like, everyone is fine. And the problem that we have is denial of racism is one of the biggest perpetuators of racism, and is what allows racism to grow and to spread and to, you know, penetrate other parts of our society. When they were doing that report and, you know, going into these different institutions, no head of that institution is going to, you know, properly put their, you know, their full step forward. They're going to put their best foot forward, and they're going to be like, you know, oh no, there's no problem here, and they're not going to bring out the most outspoken person on racism. They're going to bring out the, you know, the best company employee or the best advocate for the company, who's going to say that everything is handy dandy and that there is no problem. You know, because no one wants to be the they probably realize everyone is going to be doing that. Everyone is going to be, you know, making sure that nothing comes out bad about them in the report, which ultimately you've a report which I don't think anybody believes, which Boris Johnson's able to stand over and say there's no racism in the UK. It's the most ridiculous thing that has ever come out of that administration, and there have been many ridiculous things coming out of that administration. But that's one point that I wanted to focus on, is that denial of racism is one of the biggest perpetuators of it, and it's what leads to it growing in our society. And while we're still fighting about, well, does racism exist or not? And well, you know, I seem to have a different opinion on that. The racists that are actually racist are able to get away with what they're doing, and they're able to grow and grow even more. Like the likes of far right movement is exponentially growing, and we're still here sitting talking about, well, does racism exist or not? So that's something that we kind of need to, you know, get over. If we've made mistakes, own up to them. If we've, you know, prolonged policies being in place that perpetuated racism, you know, we need to stand over and say, all right, well, like, look, it's happened, but I'm ready to rectify it now, because we're not going to be able to rectify these mistakes if we don't acknowledge them. Sorry, that's my rant over.
No,
Sorry about that.
The accusation of racism is more offensive to people than anything.
Absolutely.
No, that's extremely interesting way you put it. And if there was the kind of maturity, political maturity, as well as, you know, social, cultural maturity to arrive at that moment would be great. Certainly the Sewell report is really kind of a baffling contribution. I was looking at some of its recommendations earlier. So they have 4 things: build trust, promote fairness, create agency. I'm fascinated by that, create agency. I mean, and then achieve inclusivity. I mean, of course, these are all marvelous and wonderful things, but they're also undermined by the fact that there really isn't a problem. So we have this anodyne commitment to things that everybody would be. Who's not in favor of agency? Who's not in favor of trust and fairness? I don't know. It seems to lack credibility and a kind of serious edge in that respect. But at least it has had discussion, and the latest it seems to be that it was actually rewritten by, within the government. So God knows what they took out of it to make it even as anodyne as it is. I don't imagine there was a whole lot in there in the first place. Yeah, and a few other questions, slightly different things I wanted to ask you all about. One is maybe, I hope this doesn't seem like too nebulous a question, but I'm interested in sort of role models, people you look up to in Ireland, and maybe who you draw inspiration from. So actually, maybe Cheyanne, I'm going to ask you that. I hope you don't mind me drawing you in again, but you're our co-host tonight. So. Anybody particularly comes to mind who you think, oh yeah, this is inspirational,
That's definitely a tough one. I suppose, I hope this doesn't sound too weird, but I suppose Leon, I remember I went to the USI's Ethnic Minorities Power just a few weeks ago, and there wasn't actually that many people there, which was sad to see, but you talking was just amazing, and I just thought, wow, like this guy is incredible. And that whole weekend it just really opened my eyes, to be honest. So hopefully that didn't sound too yeah, no, I definitely think everyone though, like every single ethnic minority, every single person of color, like I feel like we all look up to each other, like you all look up to them, because I'd say nearly like 99% of people of ethnic minorities have gone through something, and I just feel like, I don't know how you couldn't not look up to them, and how they could not be your idol or your role model, or you could be inspired by them, if that makes any sense.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be tricky when we get to Leon, because I don't think he can say himself, but we'll wait on Leon for the moment. But could I ask you the same question, Toby? Like, anybody you particularly draw inspiration from? It doesn't have to be a public figure, but yeah, so that sort of question makes sense to you as somebody you draw inspiration from.
I definitely think the one person that I really, really admire in every way is Kelechi Nkafo. She's actually based in the UK. She has a podcast, she's a speaker, she's a multi-array of things, and I just think she is just the perfect example of what it is to be such a powerful Black woman, in the sense that she has no fear, there's no hesitancy when speaking about issues of race. The uncomfortable conversation, she would go on Sky News, CNN, and say what has to be said. And for that, even because in the UK, a massive, massive issue is the mortality rates of Black women in hospitals when they give birth, and she has been so outspoken on that issue, especially with her own experiences. Actually, the other day she released an IGTV about her recent experience in a hospital of racism with the doctor that treated her. And I just think that if anyone does anything tonight, it's just you have to at least look her up or follow her or listen to one of her videos, because I just think she expresses how so many Black women feel in a world that's, I will say, set up against them, and just, how would I say, puts our experiences, our struggle into the most perfect sense, to be honest, because sometimes like you might know your feelings, but you might not be able to vocalize how you're feeling or how it's affecting you, it's affecting your family, and likewise. And I just think she's amazing. I'm a big fan.
Actually, you might put her name in the chat there, actually.
Yeah, of course.
So people might want to follow up. She sounds very, indeed an inspiring figure. Maybe Laura, could I ask you next? And is there somebody you sort of look up to or think is really expresses things in a particular way that you find beneficial and inspiring?
Yeah, so I would really look up to Buki Adebowale. She was just elected into USI, and she's the first Black woman who was elected into it. And just her work, like her passion for students and like what she stands for and everything, she's just such a huge role model to me. Yeah.
And is she
sorry, what?
Is she an office holder in USI then? She was elected to
Yeah, she just got elected into Equality and Citizenship, I believe, like last week. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So Matthew, maybe I'll ask you next. Anybody you particularly like to follow and look to for inspiration?
Well, I think one of the main people who got me sort of inspired to start talking more about race, especially in Northern Ireland and being Black in Northern Ireland, is Angela Artura. She was one of the people who I sadly had to interrupt whenever we were at the second Black Lives Matter protest in Belfast because they were breaking social distancing. And she sort of, after speaking to her about stuff like that, there we talked about how the media has such an impact on how people will perceive us. I mean, in Northern Ireland, I mean, they were trying to blast black faces all over social media, all over the news, being like, this is going to be a second spike. And she rose up and spoke about it alongside me and a lot of other black people who talked about these issues. I mean, she said about how Amnesty International representative here in Northern Ireland said, how can people line up in the thousands to get flat pack furniture at IKEA but can't stand up for their fundamental human rights? I mean, she and her dad literally got arrested. I get that family are just strong people and an inspiration when it comes to talk and being outspoken and not caring about what other people think when it comes to something that's so personal to you.
Very interesting. Yeah, you guys should put these names in the chat because these are people for us to look up and yeah, Leon, come to you. Is there a particular inspiration for you?
Yeah, so I think some of the names that have been mentioned already are big inspirations to me, like Buki and Angel. Two of them, I look to them, you know, and see the amazing work that they're doing. Buki's from Maynooth, by the way, so that's definitely a win for us. One big inspiration for me would be Dr. Evan Joseph. Big fan of her work. Love how, you know, strong she is when she's speaking. I just like you know, would be a massive fan of hers. So I'll write her name in here as well. But yeah, absolutely. Like really, she started the Institute of Anti-Racism in UCD. Started Black Studies modules in UCD as well. And just all you know, a really great person. So, you know, role model of mine.
She is a very interesting figure. I've attended a number of webinars that she's organized, and as I was saying, that there's been a kind of a report that the Royal Irish Academy has produced on race, ethnicity, and change in higher education. It's relatively recently come out, a collaboration between the Royal Irish Academy and the British Council. I haven't actually seen the report. I've got to track it down, but I was reading a story about it earlier, and Eben was quoted in the Irish Times piece that was on it. But it would appear as if from the report, and again, I have to look at it, that there's essentially one, you know, person of African origin who is employed in an Irish university. Like, this is quite astonishing. And Evan has not had a smooth professional career. She teaches at UCD and has contributed there terrifically. But yeah, she would be very eloquent on the distinctive challenges, professional and otherwise, that she's faced. So I think she's a great person to mention. We're coming a little bit towards the close. I had one sort of question I guess I was interested in. This is maybe a little bit of a theme one way and another, are just different organizations that are out there that you know, some of you are working with them directly, but are there organizations that we should be particularly taking note of? And they could be based in Ireland or maybe international that you formed links with. So yeah, maybe Leon, you've obviously set something up yourself, but do you link with other organizations? Are there others in Ireland whose work you particularly, you know, look to?
Yeah, on them too. So we partnered recently with the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission for their All Against Racism campaign back in January and February. They do incredible work. A lot of their studies have actually been quoted on this talk, such as, you know, the institutional issue that we have in on Garda Síochána. So I think IREC, or Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, is definitely one you should go and follow. Also INR as well, the Irish Network Against Racism. They have iReport, which is where if you you know, encounter a hate crime or you know, racist incident, you know, you can report it through iReport. So they'd be two that I'd recommend that people on this call go and follow their work. Certainly.
Thanks. Yeah. Again, if I don't know if you have the links to hand, you might even put them in the chat there. Actually, Laura, I mean, you're obviously running a group here at NUI Galway, and do you forge links with other groups and other universities in Ireland? Similarly,
not yet, because we only started up, but hopefully we will when we're back on campus and everything in September. But a really good group on Instagram would be Abolish DP Ireland. Something to look into.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, Toby, did you, are there any sort of groups that you forged links with?
Well, there's Massey, who I connected with to do my campaign, and as well a group that I become aware of recently, who I really appreciate the work, are Merge. So they're migrants and ethnic minorities for reproductive justice in Ireland. I really like this group because it is inclusive of, you know, non-binary, queer, Black people, Black people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, and Black people with disabilities, which I think is so important, because at the end of the day, their experiences are also, like, obviously Black cis people experience racism, but their experiences are even compounded again because of their experiences, you know, being part of the LGBTQ community, being part of the queer community. And I also really like that they are treating the issue of institutionalized racism within, like, the system that is An Garda Síochána, which is definitely something that I think has to be tackled at some point. I don't know if we've reached it yet, because I feel like without hate crime legislation, it's all just talk. So yeah, I definitely think that they're a group to follow.
Yeah, I must admit, I didn't realize that there isn't hate crime legislation in Ireland. That's you know, something very significant I've learned this evening. So yeah, Matthew, I don't know whether you obviously are active in all sorts of different areas. So what organizations do you sort of link up with?
Well, I actually last year became one of the panelists for Beat Freaks Arts. So basically, they push young people into the more creative industries in the UK, and they try to help people who have sort of not got a voice to speak up and talk about important issues which are affecting government. I mean, we spoke to the Shadow Minister, and like, we've done quite a lot of things. They're based in Birmingham and the Black Country, but you know, all they do is just, I mean, they've been supportive to me for it all, but I mean, I've got to speak to people from tons of different backgrounds, and we speak to tons of different charities, and we just, honestly, I really would give a shout out to them, because they're honestly amazing.
Well, I think that's so important to draw strengths from different sources, ideas, inspiration, you know, particularly if difficult moments, if you've in different ways faced, you know, attacks on positions, if you've done something publicly, strategies, all these things I think are good to use as sources of galvanization and moral support and inspiration. So
sorry, Dan, just to cut across you, but Leon, thanks so much for coming, because I know you have another event to attend to. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, we're just about ready to wind up. So I wanted to
thanks
all of our panelists.
See you later.
Fantastic discussion. Really terrific. I want to congratulate you for all the stuff that you're doing, for the leadership you're showing, the inspiration you're giving, and the contribution you've made, you know, this evening has really been terrific. So thanks.
I just have a few little questions in chat, if you guys just wouldn't mind. Toby, this question is, do you think deplatforming is the answer when it comes to racist and fascist views, or would you be of the opinion that we should engage with these people? Oh, sorry.
No, deplatform, I don't think. I'm sorry. I just have no patience for fascists or anyone that is considered the far right. I would have, when I was more naive about how just insidious racism in the country, I would have definitely said education is the key. We can educate people, but racism is just, I just think that people like that whose entire being is grounded in racist views, I just don't think that changes. And maybe another person might disagree and say that it does. I just don't think so. I definitely think, just from my experience with the Nationalist Party themselves online, I do not think that they should have any bit of say in terms of how anything is operated in this country, by far, in my opinion, never mind racism and the experiences of Black and, you know, other ethnic minorities within the country. So yeah, I definitely say deplatform.
Yeah, completely. And oh, Matthew, did you want to say something?
Do you know, I think you should educate the uneducated instead of trying to deplatform them. I believe the context always matters when it comes to race and issues like that. There, I don't believe in that. I believe like you can always break down. It's, you know, destroying barriers and breaking it down to actually have a conversation. Like, I mean, I've had plenty of conversations with many a racist, and I've changed their perspective because they're uneducated. I mean, you know, obviously there's going to be those people, I know what you're talking about, like actual genuine racists, but I feel like there's sort of a gray area where crypto fascism comes into play, where people are caught in the sidelines. I mean, people thought that doing stuff like that there, or doing different kind of signals for anti-Semitic, or doing stuff like that there, and people sort of just don't know, and then they get labeled as this thing because they're uneducated in it. Do you think that you should just deplatform people who aren't aware of what they're doing?
To be honest, I get the point you're trying to make, but all due respect, I wholeheartedly disagree. I definitely think that people who are that insidiously racist, everybody has a consciousness. Everybody knows right from wrong. We know that from a pretty young age. I think legally, I think it's the age is 12 or 11 that you know right from wrong, that you're seen in the eye of the law like that. So I definitely think that if you can, you know, commit a crime and you know that crime is wrong, racism is a crime. It's not. I definitely think people try to, how would I say, isolate racism and look at it as I don't even know what word to describe it, but I just think that there's so much educating that one can do. There's so many resources out there. YouTube, we have the internet, we have books, we have, you know, activists, we have speakers, so many ways to educate yourself, and still we have people that are racist. Still, we have people that are saying that a black man deserves to be shot outside his family home, deserves to die. Can you reform that? I don't know.
Interesting, challenging. Are there other questions that we have, Cheyanne, that we should cover?
Yeah, there is actually one for Matthew. Stats have shown racism in the North is significantly worse. Do you think that anti-racism education should be brought into the curriculum?
Yeah, definitely. The only kind of education I got about race was of mice and men whenever they called the black guy the N-word. So that's my only education really about it in history. I mean, to be fair, like some of our education, we do get educated about it, but it's just not enough. I mean, it's not enough for people to still continue to treat me differently in class and treat teachers to teach me differently. I went through an entire first school experience whenever I went to my first secondary school, and this got racially profiled, and I got accused of doing things because I looked similar to another black student a lot of the time, and I didn't do any of it. So I feel like it's just how it is. There obviously needs to be, but I don't know too many people who would want that push. And I mean, I would like that. I'd like to see a push like that there, but it's something that I just don't believe will change. I mean, just the way the climate of this country is, like, they're not enough to push for diversity for people. Like, there's more foreign people, like, from different countries. I keep bringing that back up because it's important to understand that we only do make up 0.2% of the population, but there's more people out there from different backgrounds. I feel like there needs to be more representation for the black people here, and not to put anyone on the pedestal, because everybody deserves diversity, but they're facing the brunt of discrimination in this country more than anyone. So I feel like that kind of education there when it comes to that.
Hey, thank you very much.
No, definitely. And there's just, I suppose, one more question, if you guys wouldn't mind answering. It doesn't matter who answers. It doesn't. I might ask Laura though, just because she hasn't got a question yet. But do you think it's beneficial to post informative Instagram posts or social media posts on your story as a white person concerning recent racist attacks, or does it demean the situation?
I think,
I suppose a good example of that would be, you know, the Blackout Tuesday.
yeah, like posts like the Black Square and all, I personally don't think it was informative or in any way progressive in tackling the situation of like racism in our country and stuff, but posts that are, you know, more educational and have like actual facts, figures, what we can do, what needs to be done, all that. I think those are good, yeah.
Yeah, no, completely.
Yeah,
And I think the thing about the Blackout Tuesday as well is where people weren't using the hashtag properly and they were putting Black Lives Matter. So then when you looked up the Black Lives Matter hashtag, it was just all these black squares and not the actual information. So that was definitely.
And it was nearly like, if you post a black square, oh yeah, I'm not racist, I'm covered, rather than actually doing something.
Yeah,
and that was like all they posted that day was just that black square, like nothing else then.
Like, I feel like just like reposting other people's experiences is a good way of standing there and just actually like and reading them, because you know people would see, like, I mean, especially a lot of people would just see like somebody make like the first, you know, like how people used to make the threads of like in the
Yeah.
carousel, they would post the first thing, they would not read into it. I saw so many people post things which had nothing to do with anything to do with like Black Lives Matter or anything. It was just sort of disinformation, and it was just.
Oh, Toby has her hand
Yeah,
up.
go ahead.
Yes.
I just want to add to that there that sharing information online as a white person is, you know, it's good to spread awareness. But I definitely think that a lot of people don't actually read what they're sharing. They just see something to do with Black people and they put it in their story to, you know, seem like they're diverse. Because something that I've noted recently that is really, really bothering me is the fact that, you know, Derek Chauvin is currently on trial for the murder of George Floyd. And instead, I see people sharing infographics saying that it's the George Floyd trial. It's not. A dead Black man is not on trial here. You know, the white police officer that killed him is on trial. And I think that something as small, not even small, that's actually quite significant, is really important because it puts out a sort of that, you know, George is guilty for being, you know, kneel down for 9 minutes and be murdered. And I also think as well, another important thing is to not share videos of Black people being assaulted or murdered online. Like, we don't need trauma porn. And I definitely think it shouldn't take that for white people to want to share information in the first place. And I just know as myself, as a young Black woman, I do not want to go on Instagram, click on the next story and see something that's just going to re-traumatize me again. So I definitely think that that is something that white people need to be aware and just to read what they are sharing and read it in detail, because people make lovely flowery infographics every single day about all sorts of issues, but that does not mean that the content of that is hitting the point.
Spitting facts.
Hey, well said. Thank you very much. Cheyanne, I think we might be at the end of our session. I'll say a quick, you know, sort of thank you, and then maybe hand back to you. But just to repeat what I was saying a moment ago, like, this has been fantastic, really terrific. Thank you very much for taking the time. Very engaging, inspiring, and I think an important discussion. So, you know, please keep doing what you're doing, and thank you very much for taking the time this evening. So, Cheyanne, back to you. It's been great working with you on this event. I hope we can do other things, you know, and you know, take it on from here. But over to you.
Yeah, so there's no more questions left in the chat. So I'll let everyone enjoy the rest of their Friday evening. And thanks so much to the panelists. It was so informative. I'm pretty sure nearly everyone here tonight learned something that they didn't know and got all the names of the amazing Black activists in Ireland. So thanks so much to everyone for joining us tonight.